It's the early 1930s, amidst the Great Depression in America. As a part of President Roosevelt's New Deal initiative, unemployed Californians are put back to work, with one of the projects being to install exercise and acrobatic equipment on the empty beachfront at Santa Monica. The resulting attraction soon becomes a haven for fitness fanatics, eventually earning itself the world-renowned name, the original Muscle Beach. A few years on, a California girl, going by the nickname Pudgy, takes to practicing acrobatics on the same beach to escape the rigours of her desk job on her afternoons off. Demonstrating incredible feats of strength and athleticism, Pudgy soon becomes a popular Muscle Beach figure, displaying, uncharacteristic of the time, a muscular, strong, but also clearly feminine physique. Quickly, Pudgy starts attracting spectators and a substantial fan base. She appears on magazine front covers, igniting the first well-publicised sea change in society's perception on traditional gender roles, and transforming the long-established prejudice behind women indulging in resistance exercise. By the early 40s, Pudgy had graced magazine front covers across the world and became a leading American fitness icon. Her influence helped encourage further female interest, driven mainly by her popular column in the biggest selling fitness magazine of its day, Barbells. Here, Pudgy interviewed other women in sport who had benefited from resistance training, providing more proof that lifting weights can spur sporting performance without necessarily encroaching on a woman's femininity. To add weight to her eventual legacy, she sanctioned the first female weightlifting competition in America. In her own awesome way, Abiyi Pudgy Avil Stockton sowed the seeds that would germinate into the massively popular female fitness culture we see across America and the rest of the world today. Hey, it's Alex, and welcome to the ISSN Graduate Diploma Podcast. Today, I'm providing a research review on the case study Changes in Body Composition and Neuromuscular Performance through Preparation, 2 competitions, and a recovery period in an experienced female physique athlete by Tinsley and colleagues in 2018. One fitness endeavour thousands of women across the world pursue are physique competitions. Each year, physique competitors, dressed in their rhinestone-covered outfits, step on stage among other competitors, displaying their sculpted physiques to a judging panel. These competitions are judged on a host of aesthetic appearance criteria, rather than sporting performance. Competitors are critiqued on their muscular size, symmetry, leanness, posing ability, skin tone, and makeup, with each of these criteria ranging in significance depending on the physique category. The preparation towards stepping on stage demands a combination of prolonged calorie restriction, weight training, and aerobic exercise in a bid to decrease body fat and preserve one's muscle. To meet the demands of the marking criteria for such competitions, this journey to stage can lead to physiological and psychological strain. Now, prolonged states of energy restriction in female athletes in aesthetic-focused sports has been shown to cause harmful effects on appetite regulation, reproductive functioning, and bone metabolism, indicative of the female athlete triad. With this, our present understanding of the body composition and physical performance changes that occur with female competitors throughout contest preparation and post-competition is currently limited, with aesthetic appearance being the key determinant behind a competitor's success. Understanding as accurately as possible the changes that occur throughout is essential knowledge to refine nutrition and training approaches to deliver best practice guidelines. Previous case studies involving the measurement of body composition changes in female physique competitors have been limited by using two compartment models of assessment, the two compartments being fat mass and fat-free mass, using skin folds and underwater weighing, and three compartment models of assessment, the three compartments being fat mass, lean soft tissue, and bone mineral content, using dual X-ray absorptiometry. All three devices are limited because they do not estimate total body water nor hold fixed value estimates for the hydration status of fat-free mass, assuming a 73% hydration, with variations in hydration status of fat-free mass ranging from 68 to 81%. This can lead to significant error estimates. These limitations were highlighted when the estimations of body composition for underwater weighing and dual X-ray absorptiometry were compared to 4 and 5 compartment models, which both factored for total body water status. The average error for underwater weighing was to the extent of 5%, with individual errors exceeding 4.2% in athletes. The average error for dual X-ray absorptiometry was 3.7%, with individual errors for up to 6.3% for estimating fat mass. These errors were so high that the researchers advised against the use of this scanner and software for measuring body fat in college female athletes. In addition, the previous case study results on body composition have been further hampered by suboptimal pre-assessment measurements. Now, with all this in mind, the aim of this case study was to provide an analysis of body composition and neuromuscular performance changes that take place before, during, and after a female physique athlete's competition season. Okay, let's dig into the study. As mentioned, this was a case study. The strengths and limitations of such a study design I'll outline later, but it means the researchers were assessing just one subject. This subject was a former NCAA Division II athlete turned female figure competitor. She was assessed throughout 18 weeks of contest preparation, 7 weeks between two competitions, and a further 9-week period post the second competition. The researchers had no involvement in the recommendations for nutrition, exercise, and supplementation programming, with the athlete being coached externally by what was deemed a highly experienced competitive bodybuilding coach. The athlete was 27 years old at the start of the study, with a baseline body fat of 20.7%, with 11 years of lifting experience. The athlete outlined that throughout her lifetime, she had never consumed any substance on the World Anti-Doping Agency prohibited list, WADA. Here's a brief insight into the athlete's exercise regime throughout the experiment. She weight trained 4 to 6 days per week, with primary muscle groups worked 1 to 2 times per week, with a greater volume on lagging body parts throughout certain phases of the prep. The average working sets per workout were 25 to 35, with 10 to 20 sets per primary muscle group, with an emphasis towards volitional contractile failure for most working sets. The researchers highlighted that the programs contained an extensive variety of different exercise techniques, with continuous high volume throughout the 34-week experiment. In addition, she was programmed a mixture of cardio exercises ranging from cycling, walking, running, and stepping, which increased from 64 minutes up to roughly 300 minutes per week in the lead up to the first competition. The intensities of the sessions started with an emphasis more towards high intensity training and transitioned over to steady state cardio as the competitions came closer. These latter sessions were performed in different energy states, with some being fasted and others non-fasted. Throughout the 34 weeks, 12 testing sessions were performed, which comprised of measurements 3 days before and 5 days after both competitions. Let's take a look at what the researchers wanted to measure throughout the experiment. Body composition, but this time using a modified 4-compartment model whereby a combination of dual X-ray absorptiometry and multi-frequency bioelectrical impedance analysis were used. Let me elaborate on these methods. For those unaware, dual X-ray absorptiometry DEXA assesses lean soft tissue, fat tissue, and total and regional bone mineral content. This requires a person to lie down inside a full-body X-ray machine. Measurements are attained by passing a low-radiation X-ray beam through tissues. With tissues varying in energy absorption, this allows for estimations of both the type and quantity of the different body composition compartments. A multi-frequency bioelectrical impedance analysis is the device that estimates one's total body water status. This requires the person to stand on a mounted footplate device, whereby a light electrical current runs throughout the body, estimating the conductive volume of the subject, being total water content. This joint approach allowed for a more refined estimation of body composition changes by reducing the potential noise of fixed value estimations of fat-free mass hydration status. Resting metabolic rate was assessed using indirect calorimetry after an overnight fast. Now, if you're unfamiliar with such a device, picture a Darth Vader type mask that covers one's mouth and nose with a nozzle on the end which is synced up to a machine. When wearing this mask, it requires the athlete to be lying down, rested, but not asleep in a climate-controlled room. In this state, the athlete's resting metabolism is measured indirectly via both the consumption of oxygen and the production of carbon dioxide. With this, the ratio of carbon dioxide production to oxygen consumption allows for the measurement of respiratory quotient, which is a measure of what fuel sources are being predominantly metabolized at that given time. For instance, if a respiratory quotient of 1 is produced, this highlights that an equal amount of carbon dioxide is being produced to oxygen consumed, thus giving the indication that 1 is oxidizing predominantly glucose. With fat metabolism, there is less carbon dioxide produced for oxygen consumed, providing a lower index of 0.71. Using a mechanic squat device, peak force and rate of force development through isokinetic, meaning a constant speed, and isometric, meaning both joint angle and muscle length remained fixed, contractions were assessed. The isometric force test required the athlete to provide maximum effort pushes at knee angles of 120 and 150 degrees, with maximum effort pushes lasting 2 to 3 seconds. After this test, the subject was then assessed for isokinetic force production, whereby the subject performed 4-second concentric and eccentric squats with maximum effort for 2 repetitions. Finally, the subject undertook an eating questionnaire, which through a series of questions scored 3 different components of the subject's eating behavior: restrained eating, uncontrolled eating, and emotional eating. These were then configured into a raw score out of 100, with the higher the score being indicative of greater cognitive restraint, uncontrolled, and emotional eating. Let's peel back the results of this case study. The athlete's rate of total body weight loss per week was less than 0.7%, leading into the first competition, and a slightly slower rate going into the second competition. This resulted in a total body weight reduction of 6 kilograms by the second competition. After 2 months of the recovery diet, the subject returned just above her baseline weight. Fat mass decreased by a total of 6.4 kilograms by the second competition. In the recovery phase, post-competition, fat mass increased at a rate of 8 to 9% per week. Fat-free mass remained stable for the first 2 months of contest prep and increased by 2.1% before the first competition, with a slight reduction by the second competition. During the recovery phase, fat-free mass increased and peaked at 54.2 kilograms, a 4.6% increase relative to baseline measurements. Concentric and eccentric peak forces reduced to the extent of 19% before the first competition, with a return close to baseline values before the second competition in concentric peak force, but reducing again post the second competition. By the end of the experiment, both remained below baseline values. Rate of force development reduced by up to 57% before the first competition, with a small recovery before the second competition, but maintained below baseline levels by the end of the recovery phase. Isometric hand grip strength reduced by 21.9% after the second competition, with a partial retrieval during the recovery diet. The athlete's baseline resting metabolism was 1,345 calories, which reduced by 143 calories prior to the first competition, and reduced further by 83 calories between the first and second competition. 1 month after the second competition, the subject's resting metabolism returned to baseline levels, which further increased to 1,435 calories by the end of the experiment. Respiratory quotient averaged 0.74 in the 4 months leading into the first competition, indicative of greater fat oxidation, elevating to 0.82 in the 5-day calorie increase phase the week after the first competition, highlighting a greater usage of carbohydrate metabolism, and then returning to 0.74 when dieting continued into the second competition, and then again increased to an average of 0.85 after the second competition and throughout the recovery phase. The score for cognitive restraint from baseline to 1 month into the contest prep increased by 24%. For the rest of the assessments, the score remained above baseline values. Uncontrollable eating reduced from baseline by 25% 3 days prior to the first competition, but increased during the inter-competition phase by 27%, which continued to increase during the first month of the recovery phase. After the 2 months of the recovery diet, this remained 18% greater than baseline. All values for the emotional eating score remained at 0 throughout the experiment. Okay, so the athlete's program nutrition. The athlete's baseline energy intake came to 1,610 calories, with an energy availability estimate of 31 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass, with her macronutrient composition being 42% protein, 41% carbohydrates, and 17% dietary fat. On the athlete's non-training days leading up to the first competition, calories were reduced by 100 calories, estimated to be an energy availability of 29 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass. These energy reductions came exclusively from carbohydrates, with a prescribed intake of 29%. The programmed energy intake was adjusted throughout contest prep to ensure continued fat loss, with intermittent spells of energy intake at its most restrictive, coming to 965 calories per day, with an estimated energy availability of 18.2 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass. Okay, let's take a look at the interesting set of supplements prescribed to the athlete throughout contest prep. Throughout the entirety of the 34 weeks, 4 grams of fish oil, 10 grams of branched-chain amino acids BCAAs intra-workout, 10 grams of glutamine post-exercise, a B complex supplement, vitamin D3 at 5,000 international units, 1 milligram of vitamin K2, 800 milligrams of chelated magnesium split between post-exercise and before bed, a women's probiotic at 25 billion bacteria, and 2 multi-ingredient digestive enzymes were prescribed to the athlete. 2 months into contest preparation, the athlete was then recommended 10 grams of soluble fiber per day, curcumin sunflower phospholipids at 1000 milligrams per day, calcium D-gluconate at 2000 milligrams, didolymethane at 200 milligrams per day. 2 months before the initial competition, the subject began consuming a fat-burning supplement which contained a mixture of cocoa extract, teacrine, alpha-glycerolcholine, caffeine anhydrous, rhodiola rosea, decaffeine maleate, cayenne pepper extract, grains of paradise, and black pepper extract. 1 month before the initial competition and continuing into the second competition, the athlete added in 10 milligrams of yohimbine and L-tyrosine before endurance exercise, and 1 packet of exogenous ketones before all exercise sessions and when energy levels were low on non-training days. Between both competitions, the incorporation of an anti-cortisol supplement containing 1,600 milligrams of phosphatidylserine was consumed post-exercise. In addition to orally consumed supplements, the athlete also used a host of transdermal creams purported to reduce fat mass and water. Immediately before the second competition, the athlete used purported water-removing agents, a diuretic, and purported glucose disposal agents. Okay, so how should we think about this study? Well, first, this was a case study, which are commonly thought of as holding little weight compared to other study designs that control for independent variables and have a larger subject size. However, this argument can, I'd like to think, be reframed if we consider the results of not just one case study, but multiple case studies with similar measurements. Compiling the results in a triangulated manner, we can start to induce more general associations. In an area such as physique competitions, which won't receive much financial support, for instance, this study received no external funding, employing a method of triangulation with results is likely our most practical way to investigate this area. Also, case study experiments are able to do certain things that many other scientific studies just can't do. For instance, performing a case study on a single subject can really exceed what's possible to assess compared to other types of experiments. Such comprehensiveness was shown here with the examination lasting 34 weeks with 12 separate assessments on metabolism, physiology, sports performance, and psychology. Now, a core strength to this paper is the approach to measuring body composition. In the previous 3 case studies, the use of skin folds, DEXA, and underwater weighing were performed to assess body composition changes. As discussed at the beginning, such methods use fixed values for the measure of hydration status of fat-free mass being 73%. In a study by Ploeg et al. In 2001, monitoring 5 female bodybuilders during their prep, it was shown that the percentage of total body water to fat-free mass varied from 71.5 to 76.5%. As a result, when assessing the body composition of the female bodybuilders using a DEXA device, it led to an underestimation of body fat by 3% and a high degree of variability in individual body fat measurements using underwater weighing when compared to a compartment model that independently measured for total body water. In this case study, the subject's fat-free mass hydration status varied from 69.9 to 74.3%. With this in mind, the measurement of total body water using the modified 4-compartment model used in this study would have provided a more accurate estimate of the real changes occurring compared to the 3 previous case studies. Despite the improved accuracy of measuring body composition, there was no way to tease out whether any of the practices implemented by this athlete independently impacted body composition, as no variables were controlled for. Take, for instance, the plethora of supplements advised to the athlete. It's impossible to know if any were offering a unique benefit to the body compositional changes that occurred. Now, many of the supplements advised to this athlete currently lack any scientific human data, but some do have some human research behind them. More specifically, data in athletes. With this, some of these supplements have been shown in a recent survey study to be popular among physique competitors. The survey conducted by Chappelle et al. In 2018 showed that female physique competitors on average use 5.4 supplements during the phase of contest preparation, with 53.5% of competitors using branched-chain amino acids, 31% using individual amino acids, 11.1% using vitamin D, 46.6% using fish oil supplements, and 36.5% using fat burners. Let's look at the research on some of these popular supplements and their proposed ergogenic effect on body composition and muscular performance. The athlete was prescribed 10 grams of branched-chain amino acids intra-workout throughout the entire experiment. Now, branched-chain amino acids, being the three amino acids leucine, isoleucine, and valine BCAAs, constitute around 14 to 18% of the amino acids in our skeletal muscle protein. Despite the anabolic benefits of BCAA supplementation being extolled through marketing, there remains very little research on the response to muscle protein synthesis with their independent ingestion without the consumption of additional protein. In a recent study assessing the consumption of 5.6 grams of BCAAs or a placebo drink immediately after resistance training in 10 young resistance trained men, it was shown that the ingestion of an isolated BCAAs increased muscle protein synthesis by 22% compared to placebo. However, the magnitude of the increase was 50% less than previous reports of a 20-gram dose of whey protein containing a similar composition of BCAAs. These results show that BCAAs consumed in isolation does increase muscle protein synthesis, but without a full complement of essential amino acids available, the increase just isn't as great, supporting the idea that essential amino acid availability is the rate-limiting factor for the maximal stimulation of muscle growth, rather than just the three branched-chain amino acids. Also, the athlete attaining any further muscle-building benefits in the presence of her already high protein intake of 2.6 grams per kilogram per day is quite unlikely. For further information of protein recommendations for maximizing muscle growth, take a listen to episode 6 of the podcast titled, "How much protein can the body use in a single meal for muscle hypertrophy?" The athlete was prescribed 10 grams of glutamine post-exercise. Glutamine is our most abundant free amino acid in blood plasma and skeletal muscle. However, under specific conditions of physiological stress, our body stores of glutamine synthesis can reduce below concentrations required for homeostasis. As a result, we refer to glutamine as a conditional essential amino acid, meaning in normal physiological conditions, we produce ample supplies, but in conditions such as illness that can cause hypercatabolic stress, dietary intake of this amino acid becomes increasingly important. In sports nutrition research, glutamine has been shown to increase the uptake of glycogen, support exercise-induced immune suppression, and reduce gastrointestinal permeability. However, such results have been shown in endurance sports rather than resistance training. The use of glutamine in the context of improvements in body composition, muscle protein metabolism, and muscular performance was studied by Kandel and colleagues in 2001, whereby a group of young adults were double-blinded to consume either 0.9 grams per kilogram of fat-free mass per day of glutamine or a carbohydrate-matched placebo over 6 weeks of a structured full-body weight training program. By the end of the experiment, the results showed no effect of glutamine supplementation compared to placebo on estimations of fat-free mass, muscle protein breakdown, and strength performance, leading the researchers to conclude that glutamine supplementation offers no additional benefit for body composition or muscular performance in young adults. The athlete was also advised to take 5,000 international units per day of vitamin D3 and 1 milligram of vitamin K2 throughout the entire 34-week experiment. Now, both of these vitamins are fat soluble, with their dual consumption being shown to complement the effects of each other. Vitamin D is a corticosteroid, a steroid hormone just with a broken ring in its molecular skeleton. Our ability to obtain sufficient vitamin D is predominantly via sunlight exposure, or more accurately, via ultraviolet B radiation. Once vitamin D is obtained, through a series of conversion steps in the liver and kidney, the metabolically active form serum 1,2,5-dihydroxyvitamin D is produced, which binds to vitamin D receptors and yields the main biological effects on the body. With new technology showing vitamin D specific receptors within bone, the immune system cells, cardiovascular system, and skeletal muscle, interest has grown looking at serum levels of vitamin D and the physiological features that may influence athletic performance. With this, many athletes have been shown to be vitamin D deficient, being a byproduct of not getting enough daily sunlight exposure, one's ethnicity, and genetics. As a result, this has led many coaches using blanket supplementation recommendations with athletes. Despite the wide variance in baseline concentrations shown in research and the lack of clarity on the ergogenic effects of vitamin D supplementation in athletes. With this high-dose blanket supplementation, without identifying the athlete's basal vitamin D status, in fact, might cause a negative impact on the positive physiological effects of having sufficient vitamin D. In a recent study examining the effects of high doses of vitamin D at either 35,000 international units versus 70,000 international units weekly in elite athletes, it was shown that despite both doses being effective in raising serum 25-dihydroxyvitamin D levels, the highest dose of 70,000 international units per week also raised the vitamin D catabolic product 24,25-hydroxyvitamin D, which dampened the metabolically active form of serum vitamin D signaling. In addition, even when supplementation stopped, the increase in the vitamin D catabolic product remained for up to 6 weeks. With this in mind, there was no mention of baseline vitamin D status being assessed in this athlete. Thus, we could hypothesize that blanket daily supplementation of vitamin D3 at 5,000 international units throughout the entire experiment of 34 weeks may have led to phases of very high serum 25-dihydroxyvitamin D levels, particularly in the athlete's summer months, which could have caused a negative interference on the metabolically active form of serum vitamin D and its effects on receptor signaling. The athlete was prescribed 4 grams of fish oil to consume throughout the entire competitive campaign. Fish oils are used to mainly describe 2 omega-3 fatty acids, eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, and docosahexaenoic acid, DHA. These fats are found in fish, animal products, and phytoplankton. As humans, we don't possess the required machinery to biosynthesize omega-3 fatty acids, making them essential fat sources to obtain from the diet. The consumption of omega-3s that leads to a ratio of 1:1 with omega-6 concentrations in the body has been shown in research to provide various metabolic health benefits. In the context of sports performance, research demonstrates a potential mechanism for fish oil supplementation to enhance the rise in muscle protein synthesis with protein ingestion post-exercise. But such results have been shown mainly in trials on the elderly or via research models that use direct infusion of amino acids and insulin, which aren't of practical relevance. Contrary to these findings, in a recent study by Miglori et al. In 2016, the research group compared 5 grams per day of fish oil compared to 5 grams per day of coconut oil, alongside 30 grams of whey protein post lower body resistance exercise, over 8 weeks in resistance-trained men. It was shown that the fish oil condition resulted in no further benefit to the muscle protein synthetic response compared to the coconut oil condition. And in fact, fish oil consumption in accordance with whey protein appeared to independently dampen important kinase signals associated with muscle adaptation. On the other hand, fish oils have been shown to exert anti-inflammatory effects, reduce oxidative stress, and improve neuromuscular function in athletes. In a recent study by Black et al. In 2018, assessing the intake of 1.5 grams of omega-3 fish oil to a protein-based supplement throughout 5 weeks in professional rugby union athletes, results showed moderate beneficial effects on reducing lower limb muscle soreness, fatigue, and attenuating the reduction in counter-movement jump performance compared to a protein-only supplement. To support further fat loss, the case study leading into the final stages of competition supplemented with yohimbine and a caffeinated fat-burning supplement. The effects on caffeine and increases in metabolic rate have been consistently shown in research. In a study by Ackerson and colleagues in 1980, the ingestion of caffeine in anhydrous form at 8 mg per kilogram of body weight or coffee at 4 mg per kilogram of body weight, and the effects on resting metabolic rate were measured over the course of 3 hours in normal and obese individuals. The group showed a dose-dependent effect on resting metabolic rate, whereby 8 mg per kilogram of body weight increased resting metabolic rate on average by 16%, although with a wide degree of individual variability between subjects, ranging from 8 to 32% changes, along with 4 mg per kilogram of body weight of caffeine from coffee, increasing resting metabolic rate by 12% in normal weight individuals and 10% in obese individuals. Yohimbine is the active substance found in yohimbe bark, which is derived from an evergreen tree found in Western and Central Africa. Its properties for increasing the release of norepinephrine induce an increase in heart rate, blood pressure, and help mobilize fat from adipose tissue. Thus, via these mechanisms, it's been proposed as a supplement which may assist fat loss and more specifically, assist in getting rid of stubborn body fat. However, to date, little research has been done in humans to directly answer the latter hypothesis. In a recent study on 20 high-level male soccer players, it was found that 10 milligrams of yohimbine consumed twice per day for 21 days decreased body fat percentage on average from 9.3% to 7.1%, along with fat mass reducing by 1.9% compared to placebo. In addition, a study on 20 obese women measured over 3 weeks found that those who supplemented with 5 milligrams of yohimbine consumed 4 times per day, alongside a 1,000 calorie diet, showed greater reductions in fat mass of 1.3 kilograms compared to a calorie-matched placebo group. But the research at present is limited, and the purported benefits of directly targeting stubborn body fat areas is yet to be researched. In addition, the increase in heart rate and blood pressure may be side effects that could lead to further mood disturbances to an athlete who is already experiencing a lot of physiological and psychological stress. The results of this case study may be applicable to female physique athletes when combined with the results of other recent findings in this area, whereby we can start to tease out potential body composition and muscular performance trends with the practices used. So what's the big picture here? The athlete reduced her body fat from 20 to 11% by the second competition. Such reductions are similar to the previously reported case studies on female physique athletes, with Halliday et al. In 2016 showing a 15 to 9% reduction, Rohrig et al. In 2017 a 30 to 16% reduction, and Petritzau et al. In 2017 a 24 to 11% reduction over their respective contest preps. In a study assessing 27 female physique competitors by Holme et al. In 2017, similar results were shown, with body fat reductions from 23 to 13%. These respective body fat reductions were attained throughout contest preps ranging from 19 to 25 weeks. Changes in the athlete's fat-free mass increased by 2.1% before the first competition and remained above baseline levels before the second competition. Fat-free mass then continued to climb in the early recovery phase and maintained thereafter. However, fat-free mass only surpassed meaningful estimated differences post the second competition, potentially inferring that some of the changes were due to measuring error, shifts in glycogen, and/or total body water status, particularly in the phases post each competition, which would have seen a significant increase in calories and carbohydrate intake. These preserving effects on fat-free mass are further supported by the 3 previous case studies in female physique athletes. Halliday et al. In 2016 demonstrated no change in fat-free mass throughout the contest preparation period, whereas Patrizio et al. In 2017 showed a 1.5% increase, along with Rohrig et al. In 2017 showing a 2.8% increase. In addition, in the study by Holme et al. In 2017, some of the competitors showed small increases in fat-free mass throughout contest prep, whereas most either maintained or showed a decrease. Again, it's important to remember that the measurement devices used in the previous studies all held fixed values for the hydration status of fat-free mass. Thus, some of the supposed increases seen in these previous studies may have been in part due to increases in total body water or glycogen status. The athlete experienced a reduction in resting metabolic rate by 226 calories before the second competition. Such reductions have been demonstrated in both female and male physique competitors during their contest preps. The case study by Rohrig et al. In 2017 showed a 155 calorie reduction in resting metabolic rate from baseline, whereas in a case study on a male natural bodybuilder after 6 months of contest preparation, resting metabolic rate reduced by 1,000 calories. However, despite the 226 calorie reduction throughout contest prep found in this study, 5 weeks into the recovery period, resting metabolic rate returned to baseline with a further 6.7% increase above baseline values by the end of the experiment. The athlete's respiratory quotient showed an increased reliance on fat oxidation throughout contest prep. In a previous case study by Robinson et al. In 2015, assessing a natural male bodybuilder, similar findings of an increased reliance on fat oxidation were also found throughout the athlete's dieting phase. Such shifts towards a greater use of fat oxidation during diet-induced weight loss have been shown to decrease the chances of excessive weight regain, with higher daily respiratory quotient values being associated with an increase in weight regain post-weight loss. The athlete showed significant decreases in muscular performance from baseline to the second competition period, with the most pronounced reduction being a 57% loss in force development showed before the first competition. A previous case study in a natural bodybuilder by Rosau et al. In 2013 showed similar reductions in strength performance, with a 13.8% reduction in barbell back squat, a 8.4% reduction in bench press, and a 7% reduction in deadlift compared to baseline markers. Such reductions in this case study coincided with impairments in the athlete's mood state, with reported increases in fatigue and decreases in vigor. Whether such mood changes coincided with the performance reductions found in this study were not highlighted by the researchers. These reductions may have also occurred due to a lower concentration of carbohydrates consumed in the diet, with the athlete's intake ranging from 2.5 grams per kilogram of body weight at the start of prep to phases whereby it reached 0.33 grams per kilogram of body weight close to competition. Previous research has shown that low levels of carbohydrate availability in skeletal muscle can inhibit calcium release, reducing the rate of muscle contraction and force production. At baseline, the athlete noted not receiving a regular menstrual cycle. Throughout the 34 weeks of assessments, it was noted that only one menses occurred, which was reported at 1 month into contest preparation, with the athlete self-reporting that a regular menses resumed 3 months after the second competition. In all 3 of the previous case studies in female physique athletes, each competitor showed a disruption in their menstrual cycle, with either a delay in menses or a complete loss throughout contest preparation. The 2 case studies in which amenorrhea occurred, the retrieval of their respective cycles took between 4 and 71 weeks. In addition, in the study by Holme et al. In 2017, out of the 5 subjects not using estrogen-containing contraception in the dieting group, all 5 competitors demonstrated menstrual cycle disruption. Such findings are further supported by a survey assessing female weightlifters, whereby a subset of the women who competed in at least one bodybuilding competition, 86% demonstrated menstrual cycle dysfunction. Okay, to finish, let me focus on a few interesting observations from this case study and others that can contribute to our understanding of the effects of contest prep diets on female physique athletes. First, let's address the discord found between fat-free mass and resting metabolic rate. Fat-free mass is commonly referred to as the best determinant of resting metabolism. However, in this case study, the athlete demonstrated a 226 calorie reduction in resting metabolic rate leading into the second competition, yet showed no reduction in fat-free mass. The authors in fact highlighted that when resting metabolic rate was at its lowest, the athlete's fat-free mass was 1.2 kilograms higher than baseline values. In support of this lack of an association, a recent study by Kula et al. In 2016 assessed the resting metabolic rate values in exercising women with functional hypothalamic amenorrhea caused by low energy availability and a control group of exercising women with a regular menstrual cycle. Their results show that resting metabolic rate in exercising women with amenorrhea was on average 8% lower than predicted resting metabolic rate values, compared to no differences found in predicted values for the regular menstruating women, despite fat-free mass not being reduced in the women with amenorrhea. The researchers went on to conclude that the reduction in resting metabolic rate were likely due to metabolic adaptation through energy conservation rather than fat-free mass. Such findings highlight that fat-free mass is an inaccurate proxy for determining one's resting metabolic rate in females in a state of underfeeding. Rather, other important factors need to be considered, such as one's energy availability. We could infer that the athlete's low energy availability status at the beginning of the contest prep led in part to the pronounced suppression in resting metabolic rate. This baseline status of low energy availability was also likely the reason why the athlete wasn't receiving a regular menstrual cycle at the beginning of the competition. Second, let's address the consistent results showing increased fat-free mass preservation in female physique athletes. To date, all 3 case studies assessing the body compositional changes in female physique athletes have shown a greater preservation and in some cases, such as this athlete, an increase in fat-free mass throughout contest preparation. Although it's likely that some of this reporting of fat-free mass is likely a byproduct of total body water fluctuations, these results are in stark contrast to the case study reports in natural male bodybuilders, which in all studies to date have shown reductions in fat-free mass throughout their respected competitions. One theory that offers an explanation behind these results is by Gilbert Forbes and his proposed concept of a Forbes curve model, whereby the proportion of fat-free mass lost during an energy deficit will be determined by one's baseline body fat levels. With this in mind, due to evolutionary biology, females have a greater proportional amount of fat mass compared to males. Body fat levels for a rough measure are 7% higher on average in females compared to men, with essential fat levels in women being roughly 10%, whereas in men, 3%. Thus, women start and end their respective contest preps with more body fat than men, potentially not reaching body fat thresholds, whereby fat-free mass becomes a required energy reserve during dieting conditions. In a study by Hooven et al. In 2015, assessing the effects of a high-protein, hypoenergetic diet in male athletes, it was shown that subjects with a baseline body fat at 10% or above over 4 weeks were able to preserve fat-free mass to a greater extent than leaner individuals, highlighting the important relationship between fat stores and the use of fat-free mass during an energy deficit. Another factor which could also be contributing to this phenomenon was also proposed by Gilbert Forbes, being the larger one's energy deficit, the greater fraction of total weight loss being derived from fat-free mass. In all case studies to date, the rates of total body weight reduction have been low, being equal to or below 0.7%, with previous guidelines for physique athletes being to diet at rates ranging from 0.5 to 1% of their total body weight. Thus, putting these factors together, the higher baseline body fat levels, gradual rates of weight loss, plus higher protein diets and sufficient resistance training volume could have all in some way positively influenced the body composition changes seen in the female physique athlete case studies. There are many other aspects I could dive into here, but for brevity's sake, I want to leave you with a few practical take-homes to consider if working in this domain, which are focused around the topic of low energy availability and reproductive functioning. Now, the likelihood is an athlete not on a contraceptive enduring contest prep conditions will have some form of menstrual cycle disturbance, but I want to provide some best practice guidelines to ensure the least amount of harm is caused to the competitor. First, a loss of one's menstrual cycle due to dieting is referred to as functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, a phrase I've used a few times today. As the name implies, the hypothalamus plays a role here in regulating the reproductive functioning. The hypothalamus produces gonadotropin-releasing hormone, which signals the release of hormones that ensure a regular menstrual cycle. In states of low energy availability through inadequate energy intake or too much energy expenditure, or both, peripheral signals communicate to the hypothalamus, causing it to tactfully delegate energy reserves, leading to a cascade of physiological processes reducing or completely shutting down, one being the release of reproductive hormones. But these signals don't just cause the energy costly process of a regular menstrual cycle to reduce or completely stop. Other physiological processes such as bone turnover, gastrointestinal function, appetite regulation, immunity, muscle protein synthesis, and the sympathetic nervous system can all become negatively disrupted. Thus, with the potential for such serious health complications, it's crucial for the athlete or coach to consider screening for low energy availability before even considering contest preparation. Here are some things to consider. 1. Through questions or through the athlete's own monitoring, screen for the regularity of the menstrual cycle, along with other indirect markers of low energy availability, such as low baseline body fat levels, frequent reported illness, continual fatigue, injuries, impaired recovery from training. If signs have been shown, for further clarification, the athlete may need to undergo further physiological screening to assess signs of adaptation to chronic energy deficiency, such as having their resting metabolic rate measured. A measure 90% below one's predicted value has been previously used in research as a rough estimate to indicate metabolic suppression and potential low energy availability, or potentially blood screening for the assessment of thyroid and leptin levels. Low levels of T3 and leptin are both valid proxies of low energy availability. 2. In addition, the coach or athlete can also track energy availability status. First, a reasonably accurate measure of body fat percentage is required. For practicality, consider using the US Navy calculator for gauging body fat percentage. I've used this recently and been pleased with the estimates provided. I'll provide a link in the show notes. With this body fat gauge, then through monitoring calorie intake and tracking one's physical activity expenditure, a rough energy availability status can be attained. To make this easy to calculate, I've attached in the show notes too an Excel sheet to plug in all your data. 3. Also consider getting a DEXA scan for the athlete. In addition to providing a reasonably accurate estimate of body fat, the device will offer insight into the athlete's bone mineral density by providing a Z-score estimate. Essentially, the score underlines the subject's measured bone mineral density minus the mean bone mineral density of their age group. If the subject's bone mineral density Z-score is less than -1, this is another marker of potential low energy availability, and undergoing a contest prep phase should be heavily discouraged until bone mineral density levels are back within their healthy age range. Now, when making sense of the energy availability data, you should know that -30 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass per day appears to be the threshold where greater physiological impairments occur. Thus, what the athlete or coach should be aiming for is a baseline intake that comes close to, or ideally, above 45 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass per day before considering a contest prep diet. Throughout contest prep, a focus needs to be put upon dieting slowly. It's been shown that a greater frequency of menstrual disturbances occur with larger energy deficits. In this case study, the athlete's intake was reduced by 40% below baseline needs, with the athlete's lowest energy intake corresponding to the lowest resting metabolic rate reading. As such, female physique athletes competing in this realm should aim for longer dieting windows with less severe reductions in energy intake from baseline values. In addition, other considerations such as increasing the carbohydrate content of the diet and installing diet breaks may also aid in less physiological adaptation throughout contest preparation. In terms of the approach post-competition, the primary incentive should be to increase calories above a 30 calorie per kilogram of fat-free mass threshold, with an aim towards consuming at least 45 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass per day. Secondly, the athlete should focus on transitioning back to a healthy pre-contest prep body fat level in a bid to normalize hormonal status, physiology, and menstrual cycle function. Although the amount of weight gain that typically leads to the resumption of menses is variable among physique athletes, in this case study, rates of weight gain post-diet were 1% per week, with the athlete returning to baseline body weight levels within 2 months and highlighting a resumption of her menstrual cycle 3 months post the second competition. In a female physique case study, whereby a slower approach to increasing energy intake and restoring pre-contest prep body fat levels was implemented, this coincided with a longer time frame before retrieving a regular menstrual cycle. In the case study by Halliday et al. In 2017, it took 20 weeks for the athlete to return to pre-contest prep body fat levels post-competition, with her estimated energy availability still remaining low at 35 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass. As a result, it took the athlete 71 weeks to show signs of a regular menstrual cycle. Finally, in addition to attaining a calorie intake of 45 calories per kilogram of fat-free mass and restoring pre-contest prep body fat levels, the athlete may also want to consider techniques on stress management, such as cognitive behavioral therapy, which recently has been shown to decrease cortisol levels when used with women with hypothalamic amenorrhea, which coincided with a retrieval of a regular menstrual cycle compared to those without cognitive behavioral therapy treatment. Okay, that's all from me in this episode. Before I go, I'd like to thank the key researchers from this excellent paper: Grant Tinsley, Eric Trexler, Abby Smith-Ryan, and Antonio Paoli. If you liked the podcast, then please leave a review and share it with your friends and other nutrition enthusiasts. And finally, I'd like to leave you with something to ponder for the rest of the day. It's a quote from the writer and artist Debbie Millman. Expect anything worthwhile to take a long time. In today's culture of immediacy, we are led to believe that success is but only an overnight sleep away. Seeing this concept lamented on our social media feeds, we are forged a basic truth: that our achievements shouldn't take years of focus, consistency, and hardship. Rather, with a life hack or two and a little graft, we too can be fast-tracked onto reaching this summit of success. In the age of impatience, entertaining the idea of a journey from one's present self to a life where our goals are attained sounds to many like a waste of time. However, on my own reflections, although it's important to never lose sight of one's goals, the journey of learning, contributing, and growing, in fact, is the true secret to where the seeds of internal happiness and self-knowledge germinate and blossom. In the words of the poet Constantine Cavafy, from his poem addressing Odysseus' journey back to Ithaca, "Hope your road is a long one, full of adventure, full of discovery." Okay, that's all from me today. As always, stay curious, think critically, and never stop learning. Thanks so much for listening.